Hey, hi. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up AWS infrastructure testing framework using pytest and GitHub Action. As you see in this PPT depicts my demo. Here I'm going to show you like how you can set up a complete testing framework for your AWS infrastructure with using CI/CD pipeline, GitHub Actions. Right. So as usual in my videos, I'm going to show my demos into two parts. The first part I'm going to show you like how does this scenario can be achieved with using design diagrams, and in the second part I'm going to walk you through the code and also finally show you the real-time execution of this demo. Right. So before I walk you through the first part of the demo, a kind request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. So with that note, we can get started with the first part. So here I'm going to quickly walk you through how do you can set up this testing framework at GitHub Actions with using pytest, right, to actually set a framework which can help you to do the required testing of your infrastructure, right? So here, say you have a big AWS infrastructure, and that infrastructure is been provisioned by infrastructure as a code, or it could be using any kind of AWS SDKs. Now, once that infrastructure is deployed into the AWS, you need to have a framework which actually can do a testing, right? And that's what we call it as a testing framework. So here I'm using a very famous community based a module, that is Python module called pytest, which can help you to achieve the required testing at GitHub Actions and for your infrastructure, that is at AWS, right? So the flow of this framework would be something like this. You will gonna write the code that is required for testing framework in Python and using pytest modules, and those source code will be kept at your GitHub. This is your GitHub, and you're gonna leverage the GitHub Actions workflows to do the required deployment, and post deployment you're gonna do a the deployment test cases. You're gonna execute the deployment test cases, and finally based on the the result of the testing, you will declare that deployment either as success or failed, right? And that's what the criteria where that kind of decision would be taken by the your pytest framework, right? Say developer will be developing the testing framework with using Python, using module, that is Python module called test, pytest, right? And whenever you do a deployment to the whenever you do a deployment with using GitHub Actions to your AWS account, so basically you're gonna invoke the Boto3 APIs. You're gonna respond receive the Boto3 APIs. That's what I mean by these arrows. Once the deployment is complete, you have the pytest frameworks that you have written for infrastructure will be executed one after the other, and based on the the results. Okay, so let's say if all the test cases got passed, which means that deployment gets successfully complete, and you can mark it as a green checkbox, that is successfully deployed. Let's say at least one test case of your framework got failed, which means that something is wrong in the deployment, and that you could mark it as a failed deployment. Okay, so basically this is very very kind of very creative, a very innovative kind of way of achieving the, or a way of configuring the testing frameworks that is required for your infrastructure, right? And that's what I'm going to show you in this video. All right, so this is all about quick walkthrough of the my demo, that is my lab here. Now I'm going to take you to the my GitHub account and my AWS account, and then I'm going to walk you through the code. Finally we're going to see how does this pytest frameworks gives us the required testing framework, yeah, or helps us with the testing my infrastructure at AWS, right? So here, as I said, I'm using GitHub. Under that GitHub, so this is my repository called CloudQuake Labs pytest. I have created a repository dedicatedly for this demo purpose. I'm going to share this repository's link in my video's description. You can find it from there and try to replicate same at your your use cases as well. So here it contains 3 folders. One is the .github/workflow folder. This is the folder which is actually hosting the workflow definition. that is in the form of an YAML file. Yeah, and then I have the another two folders. The first one is AWS test cases, the other one is AWS test executions. As the names of these folders says, AWS test cases, in the sense this folder going to host the test cases which are written in AWS Boto3 SDKs, and those test cases will be executed by another file which is sitting in AWS test execution, which is basically again a Python script only, which is actually consumes the pytest module framework and executes the test cases that are written in the AWS test cases, right? Finally, whenever you running those test cases, you're going to get the result either pass or failed, right? And that's what will be done, or that's what actually the conclusion will happen because of execution present in the because of the executions of the file present under this folder. Yeah. All right. So that is about the folder structure. I'm going to take you to my AWS account. This is my AWS account. In this one, I have a couple of since this is a demo purpose, I'm going to do a testing on my two services, which let me call it as my AWS infrastructure. One is Amazon S3 bucket. The other one is I'm going to check some roles and the policies present in my AWS IAM services. So what I do is, now this is all about the basic. Now I'm going to go to my, go to my VS Code. I'm going to help you to the code walkthrough, and then finally we're going to see the demo of this testing framework, right? Now this is purely code walkthrough. I'm going to help you through how you can construct the Python files, YAML files, how you can use the Python Boto3 module, pytest modules to achieve the required testing framework. So whatever the GitHub repository that I have showed you here in the folder structure level, I have cloned that GitHub repository in my VS Code here. And as I said, it contains a GitHub action file. So this is the GitHub action file. I'm going to walk you through this later. Before that, I need to walk you through the folder structures, that is test cases and the test executions. Okay. First, let me take you to the test cases, because as the folder name says test cases, this is the folder which is hosting Python file meant to execute a test cases belongs to a particular services or particular group of services, you can call it as. Yeah. So in this one, you need to have a init.py file, basically _init__.py file, which is the default file which gets executed whenever you initiate a Python execution or Python compilation underneath this folder, right? That's the reason init.py file is it plays a very vital role in the execution of the Python files. Yeah. And after that, I have created two files, as you see the names, that is AWS IAM test.py file, AWS _S3 test.py file. So as the namespace, I have created one file per test cases belongs to per services. Yeah. So basically, whenever you do a deployment to AWS, right? When you deploy your infrastructure to the AWS account, you will have the services being deployed, right? So what you can do is you can write a test cases based on the services, so that you can segregate easily, manage easily, helps us to cover all the test cases easily. And that's the reason I have created two files. One file is meant for IAM services, one file is meant for S3 services. As I said, this is a demo purpose. That's the reason I have segregated my two services. But in the production, the scenario could be different. So let me walk you through the AWS IAM test, IAM test.py file. As I said, this file is hosting, it has a test cases, right? So how do you write the test cases in the pytest frameworks? So as I said, I'm using the AWS Boto3 module. So what I do is I'm going to write the APIs invocations with using Boto3 module, basically, right? So this, as I said, this is a AWS test cases file. Here, when I say test cases, here one test cases is equal to a Python function. Okay, so one test case, let me repeat it again. So one test case in pytest framework is equal to one function, one Python function, right? And that's where that's where I have the two function, as you see in this one, right? I have defined the two functions and the naming convention. So whatever the name of your function gives, whatever name of the function that you give here will be equivalent to your test case name, basically, right? So give the name of your function very carefully, so that it not only justifies the name of your function but also justifies the name of test case as well. That's the reason the name I have given here is AWS underscore IAM underscore check if underscore policy underscore exist, right? So what does this mean? So in this sense, basically, here I'm checking whether a policy is present in my AWS account. Okay, say when you are doing a deployment, you are creating the policies IAM roles. Now the test cases would be check if the policy is created, check if the role is created, check the content of the policy, check the content of the role. Okay, so these are the test cases, right? So here since this is a demo, I'm just checking whether the policy exists or not. That's my test cases, and that's what's been converted into a function definition with a parameter called IAM. So this is not a normal IAM string, but this is a Boto3 client IAM. Okay, think like that, yeah. And underneath this one, as you see, I have a try except block, and in this one, as I said, we are invoking the Boto3 module of IAM service. This IAM is nothing but Boto3 client for IAM service, and underneath that client we are invoking a API called get policy, and policy name ARN is this is something like AWS given ARN. That's what I'm getting from that. And the response is nothing but the output of that particular API invocation. You will evaluate that API response and try to give or return the output. Okay, so basically this function would return either false or true. If something is error, say this policy does not exist in your account, then it could go under exception and the return would be false. Let's say you have the policy successfully, then the execution would come here, return equal to true, and then the function would return true, right? So likewise, I have also created another test case, or let me call it as a Python function with a parameter that is IAM client, right? And the test case here is, or the definition of, or the name of my function is AWS underscore check if role exists. Okay, so basically, as the name of the function says, this test case is to check if the role is exist in my AWS account. And here within I have again added a try except block, and finally it has a return when it is a good case and bad case. Similarly, in the IAM Boto3 client, I'm just checking the get role, right? And this is my role name, right? And finally, if the role exists, then only it will return a true, else it will return a false. Yeah. And this is how we have created a two test cases belongs to IAM services. Now let me take you to the AWS S3 test cases as well. So the file name would be AWS underscore S3 underscore test.py file. Okay. And in this one, I have written only one single file so that I have given you two service examples so that your brain start working like how you can define the test cases for your scenarios at your side, right? So here also we are defining one more function app, or one more a function within the lambda function, one more Python function here, right? And the name of the function is again mimics the or equivalent to the name of a test cases here, that is AWS underscore S3 underscore check if the bucket exists, in the sense. So this test case is to check if the buckets exist in an account. Okay, and under this one we are giving the parameter called S3, which is nothing but a Boto3 client of S3 service, and we have a try catch block, try except block. Here I'm listing all the buckets present in the bucket in the account. If there are any bucket, I'm going to collect the name of those bucket in a list and checking if the list is full or just a vacant list. If it is full list, in nothing but it has some bucket names, then let it to return true, else return false. Okay, so that is what this test case does all about. So bottom line is you are defining a Python functions with the parameters, which is mimicking your test cases, nothing but. So if you understand what is test cases, basically test cases is nothing but which actually checks your service or your deployment certain things. Okay, certain configurations, certain counts, certain property checks. Okay, these are all test cases, checking if the services already exist or that is also a test case. Okay, and we are converting that test cases in a Python functions with the parameters, and this function would return something that could be used by the pytest module to say if the test case is pass or failed. That's what in one Python pytest framework is helping us, right? So we have declared the test cases for IAM and S3. Now let's go and check how does the pytest framework uses those test cases and try to execute those test cases and gives the result. Yeah, and that's all will happen in a folder called AWS test executions. It also has an init.py file, which is just a blank file here, because We need this file because so that the compiler of Python would understand that yes, I need to initiate a execution of these files one after the other. And here, as we had a two test cases, one is for IAM and one is for S3, we will also write a different .py files for the executing those test cases per services, right? And that's the reason I have created two files, one for IAM, one for S3. So if I go here, so here, as I was explaining, so whatever the test cases that we are written are just a blank functions which is meant to consume the Boto3 module of AWS, that is AWS Python SDKs. So here we are importing those modules called import Boto3, and in that one we are also importing the functions being written in the AWS test case folder. So how do I importing that is by pointing to the folder name dot the that is AWS test cases, and then your file name, that is AWS IAM test.py file. So you need to remove that .py and just keep AWS IAM test. That means that you are from this file you want to import these these functions are basically these modules. So one is AWS IAM check if policy exists, AWS IAM underscore check if role exists. Okay, these are the two test cases that we want to execute. So those all things can be imported here. Let's say you have hundreds of it, then you can import it here as well, right? And that's the reason to when you say 100 test cases, it does not make sense here. That's the reason we segregate it according to the according to services, according to files, to minimize it or to make it manageable. And then here I'm creating a Boto3 client which is actually consumed by the pytest modules. Okay, so this is how we do, and these are the two functions which actually takes a help of pytest, executes our test case, and validate the outputs and declare if the test case is pass or fail, right? So how do you do that? Think like that, you have this is your test case name or your Python function name, right? And here the name of your pytest execution function would be, you need to always prefix it with test underscore and then name of your test case, that is your Python functions which you are written in a test cases folder, right? Say test underscore AWS IAM check if policy exists. Okay, this is how you need to declare the pytest function which actually executes your test cases. Okay, all right, and underneath this function, so you're gonna use the keywords like assert or check, whatever. There are the list of keywords that pytest gives you to confirm on the test cases. Okay, and in this one I'm just using it assert. Okay, so assert is nothing but confirmed in layman term. And here you go, this is where you see whatever the functions or whatever the modules that we imported from the respective py files or respective test cases files, and those functions will be called here with the prefix keyword called assert, then your name of your test case frameworks, then you are giving the client here and checking what could it return. Okay, so then your test case tells that it should return true. That what it should return, right? That's the reason you will mark it as a true. If it return true, in the sense what it actually does is assert, in the sense the output of this function should equal to true, then only the test case will pass. That's what even underline the pytest framework does for us. Similarly, for the another function, that is another test case, that is check if rule exists. So here also he is appending test underscore to that to that test case name, and under the beside that we are also calling assert and calling that functions with the parameter that is IAM Boto3 client and checking the return equal to true, right? So basically what you are doing is underlying the pytest is using the same trick, in the sense it executing the functions which we declared in the test cases folder and keeping the name of their name of the functions equal to test underscore then the name of the test case or the function name, and underneath that function you are actually calling that original test case function with the parameters and checking whether what it returns. Okay, whether it returns the expected result, it compares with the expected result and declares whether the test case is false or true, right? All right, so similarly we go for the test executions of S3 test cases as well. So here also we have the Boto3 module being imported, and we have also importing the test cases being written in the AWS underscore S3 test file like this. Yeah. And here also we are creating a client for S3. Similarly, the same fashion is been followed here. That is test underscore the name of the test case, and then asserting or checking the returns of that particular function to a declared variable. In the sense, this function should return true. You know this, okay? So that's the reason you are writing it. You can write it false, and that should return false. Okay, then only the test case would pass. If there is a mismatch, whatever declare here and whatever that function returns, then the test case goes in a fail. That's for your information. Yeah. All right. So we have quickly walked through these two folders. Now let's go to the a main workflow file name, that is our GitHub action file name, which actually executes or orchestrates these PyTest cases and Py executions one after the other. And this is also the file which is actually first deploys on infrastructure, then invokes the test frameworks in this file only. You can do it here only, right? So basically, this is just a normal another like GitHub action workflow file. It has a name. This is like AWS test suite with the PyTest framework. It should get invoked on push, and the environment here is I'm just giving the AWS reason because I need the AWS reason to establish a connection to the AWS account. And it has a since I'm using the OIDC connect, I need to have the JWT token permissions, that is ID token and contained permissions. Yeah. And then I have the job, that is a testing job. Let me call it as a AWS testing, AWS deployment testing. Let me call it as a deployment testing. So basically, this is the job which actually does the AWS deployment testing. Yeah, that's the reason I have given this name. Then it should run on the Ubuntu latest. Timeout minutes is 10 minutes. Then we have a steps of the job. That is one is check outing the repository. Yeah, and then we are also I'm also doing the OIDC connect. So if you don't know how to do the OIDC connect at AWS account, please do watch my previous video where I have explained everything from scratch to end, like how you can configure, set up the OIDC connect at AWS, use it in a GitHub Actions. Okay. And for the sake of time, what I'm doing is I'm just going very fast here. So here we are setting the AWS configure credentials with using OIDC connect, and my OIDC role is, this is the OIDC role which has a trust on the on the GitHub actually. Yeah. And this is the session name, and we are using the reason US Eastern for now. Then comes the required Python module Python installation on the GitHub action machine, that is Python 3.9. It will be installed, and then later on top of the Python we also need to install the other modules which is required for pytest testing as well, which includes Boto3, Moto, and pytest. Yeah, basically Boto3 and pytest is the required one, and that gets executed by this command, that is by this run command, python-m pip install upgrade Boto3 blah blah and all. Yeah. And finally comes this is how I actually execute the run AWS test suite. So how do I, so we have written some test suite here. That suite is going to be executed here by this command. So the name of my step is, that is run AWS test suite. Yeah. And then here I'm changing the working directory to the AWS test case execution. Okay. So remember that we always run our pytest framework from the pytest calling functions. Okay, basically execution, wherever the execution is there, so we're going to do a cd to that part, and then we need to run a command called pytest-v. Here we install the pytest, and then we started to execute the pytest-v, which actually means that all the files present in this test execution has to be executed or compiled. Okay, automatically the pytest will detect the test cases present in this file, because we have the naming convention here, and the pytest has an interleaved to automatically identify the test cases, feed the input to the test cases, execute it, give the result of, check out the result of each test cases, finally summarize whether the all test cases passed or failed. If failed, what are failed? If passed, what are passed? Okay, all these results will be given by this AWS test suite. Okay, and with using pytest. Yeah. All right, so this is all about the code walkthrough. Now let's see how does it works. Okay, so for that case I need to do a push. Okay, so for this I will just call it as a cloud quick labs so let me give the name of command like my channel name, that is cloud quick labs. Yeah, I'm going to commit it now. I'm going to synchronize. So basically, as we declared the GitHub action saying like, somebody pushes to you, please execute. Let's see if my GitHub action has started to execute it here. Here you go. It has some error. Let me see what is the error basically. Deployment testing. Yeah, I'm going to go back to this one. So basically, go to the GitHub actions. Okay, so I go to the GitHub actions. So it has some failure. I'm going to check that. What is that? So if we go down, we see to see, so basically, it says, invalid. Okay, because we have a spaces here, that's the reason it is invalid. Let me make it as the some one single string. Yeah, so let me give the name like AWS deployment testing, because it does not, it should not have the spaces in it, or else it will throw the error. Okay, that's what it's doing. So let's do a updated cloud quick, let me call it as a cloud quick labs, which is my channel name testing, right? So I'm gonna give the message and I'm gonna synchronize again. Now let's see how does the GitHub actions works now, or how does it responds now. I believe that it should work. So here you go, it started, right? So let me open that. So basically AWS deployment testing has been started, and let's this is the live demo, guys. Okay, so that you are confident that whatever I'm showing is rightly working and helps you to do the same thing at your production workload, or at your environment, which can really help you to understand how does the pytest works, and how you can leverage this, and how you can use this creatively to achieve the required testing framework at your side. Okay, this is my best possible way of helping you to understand and to build your own test suite at your AWS cloud infrastructure, or it could be any cloud infrastructure. Here you go, all the job has been executed, and let me go to the from the top to bottom. Okay, so this is setting your Python for Python version, that is Python 3.9 is installed here. Then the required other modules will be installed, that is Moto 3, Moto, and pytest. And then comes run AWS test suite. Okay, here you go. So in this one, what we are did is we are running the command called pytest v by pointing to that particular folder. So under this folder, you see this is the root directory. So that is AWS test execution. So in that one directory, the pytest has compiled it and identified that it had a 3 test cases. One is belongs to testim.py file. Yeah, and it contains the it contains the test case name is test AWS IAM check if policy exists, which got passed as well. Similarly, for another one, that is check if role exists, which also got passed. And finally, it also checked for S3 bucket as well. So basically, all the 3 test cases passed. Okay, that's the reason it went green. Yeah, and this is all the post Python setup jobs, and finally credentials. Okay, so this is very good test cases. So now let me show you whether the or everything is true. That's the reason it is executing. Okay, so if I go to my AWS accounts, here is my AWS account. It contains 3 buckets, right? If I go to the IAM roles and if I check the OIDC, here you go, I have a role called OIDC as well, and it also has a default policy. That's the reason all test cases are passing. Yeah, and let me forcibly fail some test cases, and let's see how does it behaves actually. So if I go here and I let me run false here, let me just make changes here, right, so that it fail. Yeah, and this time we expect it to fail, and let's see how does the workflow terminates abruptly, which actually fails your deployment. Yeah, so testing fail cases. Okay, that's what I want to fail cases. So I'm going to commit this now, synchronize it. Now if we go to the GitHub actions, we should see the instead of green, we should see some failure, which is actually being done for some meaningful purpose. Okay, testing the fail cases, and let's see how does the this particular GitHub actions terminates abruptly, right? So currently it is executing. Let me refresh it. Here you go. So basically it's running. Okay, all right. So once I show you this one, so that marks the completion of my demo. And this is like a from scratch to end. I have shown you the required things need to be shown here, right? And if you still have doubts, you can go to reach me over the email, over the comments. Okay, I will help you to understand what is and how you can build your own. Here you go. It has executed. Let's see. Here you go. Earlier it was succeeded with a green mark. Now the test case got failed, in the sense test suite is failed. So how did it fail? We can check it. You see, because we made a changes in the IAM check if policy exists equal to false, and that got failed because there is a policy exist. but whatever we are declaring the test case is reverse of that. That's the reason test case is failed. And you see, the result is failure here. That's the reason complete deployment got failed. Okay, so these test cases will eventually have the benefit of checking, making sure that you are deploying the right code into your AWS. Okay, and finally it also captures why does it fail as well. So these are all the definitions it gives. These are all the information it tries to give you so that you understand why it is getting failed. Yeah. All right, so I have shown you the all the required things, including good test cases, failing deployment test cases as well, right? All right, so with that note, I have shown you the required things need to be shown in this video. As I say again, finally, I can request please to subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. So with that note, thank you, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.